Buying the cheapest example of a particular car is always a gamble. When purchasing such a vehicle, you must always be prepared for it to be ruined. The luck that we have been having with this Hilux Surf is almost too good to be true. In the last video, we managed to get this absolute nugget started. It sounded a bit suspicious at times and I couldn't fully tell whether we secured an absolute bargain or a lemon. And that is why in today's video, we're going to be attempting to drive the Hilux Surf for the very first time. My biggest goal with this Toyota Hilux Surf is to get it driving, registered, and ready for camping for the summertime. I have some big plans for this rig right here, and they obviously all involve the car being running, driving, and safe for the road. You guys have seen me work in the night, in the rain, to get this thing driving. And in today's video, our goal is to make it move, because that is the first step to us being able to set up the car to go off-roading, camping, and touring. Here she is, the Dirty Clapper Hilux Surf. We decided to start off our night by replacing the timing belt on the 1KZ. Changing the timing belt isn't actually too hard, especially that we had the radiator and clutch fan out. We began by bringing the motor back up to TDC. The next step was to remove the hydraulic tensioner, which is held on with just a couple of bolts. Once the tensioner was removed, we ripped the old belt off and threw it out. The timing belt kit we bought came with a new pulley. We checked the bearing on the old one and it was perfect. However, we chose to replace it anyway. Luca and I didn't use our eyes and brain. We took the pulley off the bracket. However, the timing belt kit came with a whole new bracket, so we were forced to remove the individual bolts from the bracket too, which were super tight. Once that was done, we threw away the old pulley and begun installing the new one. The first step was to grease up the bit where the pulley sits, and then we could bolt it back onto the engine. The next step was to bolt on the hydraulic tensioner, ensuring that it was still compressed by the locking pin. Since the tensioner was on, it was time to line up the timing belt marks with the timing marks on the engine. We just put the new timing belt on. It's really important to line up the top two marks together and then the ones on the bottom, because then you know that the engine is actually timed correctly. It was a bit of a pain to get the timing belt on. It had too much slack, so what we ended up doing was fitting the tensioner on and then afterwards playing with the belt. After a long time of stressing, complaining and whining, Luca and I got the timing belt to sit in the right spot. However, there were still a couple of steps left. The first being to pull the pin. I was expecting a very rapid and scary explosion, but it was actually super underwhelming. The last thing we needed to do was turn the motor by hand a couple of times, and then we were ready to fire it up.
Yep.
Since the timing belt job was complete, we could now keep moving forward with getting the Surf driving. We're so close to being able to move the car, and the excitement was running through me. In my mind, I was imagining going wheeling with the boys, and it really made me determined to get the Surf going. Nevertheless, I still had a bunch of work to do. I popped over to my local Burson auto parts store to pick up some supplies. I picked up 3 V-belts, a new idler pulley and some ATF. Installing the belts was a bit frustrating because the bolts for the alternator were caked in dirt and were super seized. Even though it was an annoying job, we managed to get it done, which meant we could put the fan back on. Chucking the fan on is literally just 4 nuts and bolts and then it's good to go. The last belt to put on was the AC belt. In the first video, I showed that the idler pulley was ridiculously seized, but luckily I was able to secure a brand new one. This idler pulley is used as a tensioner for the AC belt, and if it is too loose, it squeaks like crazy. Once that was done, I went back over all the bolts that I had just put on to make sure that I hadn't missed or stuffed up the install of anything. On a 1KZ, the tensioners for the belts are quite primitive compared to most other cars, and because of that, I found them a bit confusing. Alrighty, we finally have the 3 V-belts on. So 2 of the V-belts are a match set, therefore the alternator, the water pump, and they run off the crank pulley obviously, and then the other one is for the AC, and it runs from the AC over the idler pulley, touches touches the fan pulley and goes to the crank. Now that these 3 belts are on, we can finally put the radiator back in the car. Getting this radiator with the car was an absolute win. These alloy rads are pretty expensive and really help with the cooling issues on the 1KZ. This radiator was a thick boy, making it more of a drainer to install. I had a pretty difficult time trying to finesse it in. There was constantly something getting caught on the bottom radiator hose inlet. After a bit of raging, we got it in and it sits really nice in the engine bay. I had to line up the holes on the radiator with the rad support holes. I got the bolts in finger tight and somehow then proceeded to tighten them with a ratchet. Then came the fun part of connecting the hoses back up. Finally, we were ready to fill up the car with some coolant. That was absolute drainage, but the radiator's in. The fact that it's bigger makes it a lot harder to actually install in the car. Pretty sure this is a 45mm or a 50mm or something like that, and the standard one is literally like 2/3 of the size. Also, the mounting holes on the side, they don't actually line up perfectly because the previous owner drilled his own holes and they're all on the piss. But the rad's in, here it is. Now I need to button up all the lines underneath the car and then we might be able to go for a drive. We've got all of the lines connected to the radiator now. We're just missing a clamp here. It's on there. The bottom rad hose is on. All the lines for the auto trans are on. Just got to chuck some fluid in it and check the tension of the 2 fittings for the automatic, and then we're good to fill the car up with the rest of the fluids. To start off, I'm just going to put some distilled water into the radiator to see if it starts leaking from anywhere, and then I'll add our pink or red premix in. Fingers crossed there's no leak. We've just put coolant in the car. The overflow bottle is at the perfect level. The radiator is right up at the top. However, obviously it's going to go down when I start the car and it sucks it through the motor. The last thing to do is to put some ATF in the gearbox. It's going to be a bit hard to get the level right because I don't know how much fluid's actually in it because the converter obviously still holds fluid, but I'm going to have to warm it up and then play with the dipstick. Hopefully though, I don't overfill it. Otherwise, I'm going to have to undo the line at the bottom and I'll be screwed. I forgot to bring my gear oil pump with me, so we were stuck using the little yellow funnel. Filling up the box was a really slow and tedious process, but we still managed to get it done. We just topped up the auto with some fluid. It was an absolute drainer to fill up because we don't have the right tools. We checked the dipstick. It's perfectly on the top level of coal. Now we're going to start the car. Yes! Everything looking good so far?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Sounds really healthy. Let's have a look if there's any lights on the dash or anything. Alright, oil pressure light is good. Battery voltage, good. Coolant temp, still needs to warm up. Yeah, it's got oil pressure. I can't believe that the car was finally ready to drive. I was so excited yet so nervous about this exact moment. Everything we have done to this car has led up to this moment, and I'm super proud of myself because I actually have very limited mechanical experience and this is the first proper project I'm diving deep into. This was the true test to see if our gamble with this car had paid off.
That is so bad. Look at the trail.
Clearly something is not quite right with this car. You guys would have just seen the clips of me driving up and down the street in front of our house, and clearly the car is smoking really bad. After doing some research and talking to a few people, I've narrowed it down to one of 3 things, or I guess all of 3 things. It's either the injectors are leaking or are stuffed, the turbo could be blown, or the car is low on compression and that's why it's smoking. It's hard to tell from the color of the smoke because it looks like it's a mixture of grey and blue, and depending on the light, it looks all sorts of different colors. You may be asking, is this the end of the surf project? And no, it most definitely is not. In the next video, we're going to be trying to diagnose the issue and actually figure out what's wrong with this thing. Some of you may be asking, Peter, where have you been these last couple of weeks? Well, actually, I was on a holiday with my girlfriend and her family in Bali, so that's why there was a bit of a lack of uploads. But I'm back. I'm determined to post heaps over the next couple of months, so there's going to be plenty of surf and drifting content coming out. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and if you made it this far, comment what you think is wrong with the car below. I hope everyone has a lovely week. Peace out, and see you in the next one.
Look at the trail.